People always say money can't buy happiness, but let me tell you something. Being broke sure as hell doesn't buy it either. And when you're a 24-year-old college student working part-time at some trendy co-working cafe, watching tech bros drop more on their daily coffee order than you make in tips all week, you start to notice things. You start to pay attention to who's got what, who's spending like money's no object, and most importantly, who looks like they could use some company in their obviously lonely work-obsessed lives. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about my completely insane experiences, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. So there I was, wiping down tables at this upscale cafe, where all the startup guys and consultants camp out with their laptops, pretending their overpriced lattes justify taking up prime real estate for 6 hours straight. Most of them barely looked up from their screens, but this one guy, Larry, he was different. Not in some romantic movie way, but in a, this man is clearly drowning in spreadsheets and hasn't had a real conversation in weeks way. He'd been coming in for about a month, always ordering the same thing, always sitting in the corner booth, always looking like he was 3 seconds away from having a breakdown over whatever presentation he was obsessing over. The dude was clearly loaded. I'm talking custom-tailored shirts, expensive laptop, the kind of watch that costs more than my semester tuition. But here's what really caught my attention. He tipped like someone who'd forgotten what normal money looked like. 20% on a coffee order? 30% when he was feeling generous? Most people in his tax bracket are cheap as hell, but Larry tipped like he was apologizing for existing. That's when I knew I had to make my move. Not because I was attracted to him or anything. I mean, he was decent looking in that clean cut, probably shops at Nordstrom way, but he wasn't exactly setting my world on fire. No, what attracted me was the opportunity. This man was successful, generous, and clearly had zero work-life balance, which meant he probably had zero dating life too. Perfect. I waited for the right moment, when he was staring at his laptop screen like it had personally insulted his mother. Walking over with a coffee pot, I leaned in just enough to see what he was working on, some kind of sales presentation with way too many charts, and delivered my line. You know, if you stare at that deck any harder, it might pitch itself. The relief on his face when he laughed was almost pathetic. This man was so starved for human interaction that my mediocre joke hit him like comedy gold. We started talking, and I could practically see him melting with gratitude that someone was actually engaging with him about something other than quarterly projections and client deliverables. Here's where I got strategic. Instead of asking the usual, "What do you do?" questions that probably made him want to run screaming, I let him volunteer the information. And boy, did he volunteer it. Tech sales, he said, with this mix of pride and exhaustion that told me everything I needed to know. High stress, high reward, constantly traveling, constantly on calls with clients in different time zones. The kind of job that paid really, really well, but consumed your entire existence. When he started explaining his commission structure, without me even asking, mind you, I knew I'd hit the jackpot. This wasn't some middle management salary guy. This was someone who could make more in a single deal than I'd see in 6 months. And the way he talked about his bonuses like they were just normal parts of his life told me he was used to money flowing in and out without much thought. I played it perfectly. Impressed, but not obvious. Curious, but not calculating. That sounds incredibly demanding, I said, which was true, but also exactly what he needed to hear. Most people probably don't understand that level of commitment. The way his eyes lit up when I said that, like I'd just validated his entire existence. He started talking about how his previous relationships had failed because women couldn't handle his schedule, couldn't understand why he had to take calls at weird hours, couldn't accept that his work required sacrifice. Poor Larry, I thought, surrounded by all these unreasonable women who expected basic attention and quality time. I positioned myself as different, understanding, the cool girl who got it. Work is work, I told him with a shrug. Success doesn't happen by accident. Which again was true. My success in landing him certainly wasn't going to happen by accident. We exchanged numbers that night, and I went home planning my strategy. This wasn't going to be some desperate, obvious gold digger situation. I was going to be smart about it. Patient. I was going to make Larry feel like he'd found the one woman who truly understood him, who appreciated his dedication, who wouldn't be another burden in his already overwhelming life. The early weeks were almost too easy. I'd text him things like, "Hope your client call went well," instead of generic, "How was your day" messages. I'd ask specific questions about his deals, his travel schedule, his biggest challenges. I made him feel heard and understood in ways that apparently no one else had bothered to do. And slowly, carefully, I started weaving in questions about the financial side. Not obvious ones. I wasn't stupid, but little comments here and there. "You must be doing really well with all these big clients," delivered with admiration, not greed. "I bet those bonuses make all the stress worth it," said with a laugh. Like I was just making conversation. Larry ate it up. He loved having someone who seemed genuinely interested in his success, who understood that money was how you kept score in his world. He started sharing more details. How much certain deals were worth, what his biggest commission check had been, how his quarterly bonuses worked. Information I filed away for later use. The best part? He thought he was impressing me with his work ethic and success. He had no idea I was taking notes. About 2 months in, I decided it was time for my first test. I'd been watching his patterns, knew when his commission checks hit his account, and I'd been setting up the perfect scenario. I came to him looking stressed, not dramatically upset, just worried in that authentic way that makes men want to fix things. My paycheck got delayed, I told him. Which wasn't technically a lie since I'd specifically requested fewer hours that week. "The owner's been dealing with some family stuff and payroll is all messed up. My rent's due tomorrow and my landlord is not the understanding type." I didn't ask him for money. That would have been too obvious. I just shared my problem. Let him process it, let him come up with the solution himself. Which, of course, he did. "Don't stress about it," Larry said, pulling out his wallet like it was nothing. "I'll cover it. You can pay me back when your check comes through." I made all the right noises: gratitude, promises to pay him back, insistence that I didn't want to be a burden. But inside, I was calculating. This was easier than I'd thought it would be. Larry had just proven that he was exactly the kind of man who solved problems by throwing money at them, and that he got genuine satisfaction from being someone's hero. When my actual paycheck came through the following week, I did try to pay him back. Sort of. "Do you need this right away?" I asked, holding out the cash. I was thinking of getting a subscription for this design software I need for a project. "Would it be okay if I paid you back next month instead?" Larry waved me off like I was being silly for even asking. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Focus on your studies." Next month never came, of course. There was always something else I needed the money for. Always another small emergency or opportunity that made more sense than paying back a debt to someone who clearly didn't need the money anyway. That's when I realized Larry wasn't just generous. He was a problem solver who got off on being needed, and I was very good at having problems that needed solving. The phone crisis came about 3 weeks later, perfectly timed with his biggest commission check of the quarter. I'd been tracking his payment schedule better than he was, knew exactly when that money would hit his account. My phone was getting old anyway, so it wasn't hard to make it stop working entirely. I showed up at his apartment in tears, real ones, because I was genuinely frustrated with technology, just not for the reasons he thought. "My phone just died," I sobbed. "I can't call my professors, can't access my email, can't do anything. I have 3 assignments due this week, and no way to submit them." Larry went into full fix-it mode immediately. "Okay, relax," he said, rubbing my shoulders. "We'll figure this out. Let me take you to the store." By the end of that afternoon, I had the latest iPhone, and Larry had that satisfied look men get when they've successfully solved a crisis. He felt like a hero. I had a phone that cost more than I made in 2 months, and everyone was happy. The laptop situation required a bit more creativity. I couldn't exactly make a MacBook disappear without raising questions, so I had to get inventive. I was working in the campus library one evening when inspiration struck. I'd leave my old, barely functional laptop in the bathroom for exactly long enough to claim it had been stolen, then come back and grab it before anyone actually took it. Except someone actually did take it, which was incredibly inconvenient, since I now had to actually replace a laptop I'd been planning to keep. But Larry didn't need to know about that particular plot twist. Someone stole my laptop, I told him through genuine tears of frustration. I left it for literally 2 minutes to use the bathroom, and when I came back, it was gone. My entire thesis is on there. Everything. This time, Larry didn't even hesitate. "We're getting you a new one right now," he said, grabbing his keys. "Your education is too important to let some thief derail it." The MacBook Pro I walked out with that day cost more than my car was worth. But Larry handed over his credit card like he was buying groceries, and I made sure to express exactly the right amount of grateful amazement at his generosity. "I don't deserve you," I whispered, hugging him tight. And in that moment, watching him beam with pride at his own magnanimity, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. The moving-in conversation happened naturally about a month later. I'd been spending most nights at his place anyway, partly because his apartment was infinitely nicer than my cramped studio, and partly because it was easier to monitor his schedule and finances when I was right there. Plus, I'd been strategically paying my own rent later and later, making it seem like my landlord was becoming increasingly unreasonable. "I'm spending so much money on a place I barely use," I mentioned one evening, curled up on his expensive couch. "Especially when I'm here most of the time anyway." I let the idea percolate for a few days before bringing it up again. "My lease is up next month," I said casually. "I've been thinking about finding somewhere cheaper, maybe closer to campus." Larry took the bait perfectly. "Why don't you just move in here?" he suggested, like the idea had just occurred to him. "We practically live together already, and think about how much you'd save on rent." I made sure to seem hesitant, like I didn't want to impose or move too fast. But eventually, I let him convince me it was the practical choice, the smart choice, the choice that would benefit both of us. Moving in was like winning the lottery. Suddenly, all my expenses became our expenses, and somehow, our expenses always ended up being Larry's expenses. Rent, utilities, groceries, streaming services. Larry covered it all while I contributed. Well, my charming presence, I suppose. I did make an effort at first, cooking dinner a few times a week, keeping the place tidy. But it didn't take long for me to realize that Larry was so rarely home, and so grateful for any domestic effort when he was, that I could get away with doing the absolute minimum. He was working 14-hour days and traveling constantly. He wasn't exactly in a position to complain about the division of household labor. The best part was how guilty he felt about his schedule. "I'm sorry I'm never here," he'd say, like he was failing me somehow. "I know this isn't what you signed up for." "I understand," I'd tell him, playing the supportive girlfriend perfectly. "Your work is important. I'm proud of what you do." What I didn't tell him was that his absence was actually ideal. It gave me plenty of time to maintain my other relationship, the one with Gordon, my supposed abusive ex, who was actually neither abusive nor an ex. Gordon was everything Larry wasn't. Spontaneous, exciting, great in bed, and completely unreliable when it came to anything resembling financial stability. He was an artist, or at least that's what he called himself when he wasn't working construction or delivering food or whatever random job was keeping him afloat that month. Dating Gordon was fun. Dating Larry was profitable. Why choose when I could have both? The study group excuse was genius, if I do say so myself. 3 nights a week, I'd tell Larry I was meeting with classmates to work on group projects or prepare for exams. In reality, I was spending those nights with Gordon, using Larry's money to look good for my actual boyfriend. The clothes Larry bought me, the expensive dinners he paid for, the weekend trips he funded, Gordon got to enjoy all of it without spending a dime. I got particularly good at the logistics. I'd have Larry drop me off at the library, then walk around the block to where Gordon was waiting. We'd spend the evening at his place or out at bars Larry had unknowingly paid for, and I'd have Gordon drop me back at the library in time for Larry to pick me up. As far as Larry knew, I'd been studying all evening. As far as Gordon knew, I was just really good at budgeting my part-time job money. The conversations with my friends, especially Reagan, were probably the most honest I ever was during that entire period. When we'd get together for drinks Larry paid for naturally, I'd brag about having the perfect setup. Financial security with Larry, passion with Gordon, and neither of them knowing about the other. "You're living every girl's dream," Reagan would say. And she wasn't wrong. I had a beautiful apartment, expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, and a boyfriend who actually excited me. All funded by a man who was too busy working to notice what was really going on. The marriage planning started around month 8. Not because I wanted to marry Larry, God no, but because I wanted to secure my future. I'd done the math on what divorce settlements looked like, and the numbers were very appealing. If I could get Larry to propose, get married, and then find a way out that looked like his fault, I'd be set for years. I started leaving engagement ring photos open on my laptop, pinning wedding inspiration boards, making casual comments about our future and what kind of house we'd want someday. I'd joke about what a great husband he'd make, how lucky some girl would be to have someone so dedicated and successful. Larry ate it up. He started making his own comments about the future, talking about wanting to settle down, mentioning how different I was from his previous girlfriends. I could practically see him working up to the proposal conversation, and I was ready to be surprised and delighted when it finally happened. The only problem was Gordon. He was getting restless with our arrangement, wanting more of my time, getting jealous of the money I was spending on things he couldn't afford. I'd been telling him that Larry was just a temporary situation, that I was working on extracting myself and we could be together for real soon. But soon wasn't happening fast enough for Gordon's liking. "When are you going to dump the tech loser?" he'd ask, and I'd have to manage his expectations while keeping him interested enough to stick around. "I'm working on it," I'd tell him, "but I need to be smart about this. I can't just walk away from everything." What I meant was that I needed to figure out how to keep the money while getting the man I actually wanted. It was a delicate balance, but I was confident I could pull it off. I'd been managing both relationships successfully for months. I just needed a little more time to set up the perfect exit strategy. That's when Larry's schedule got even more demanding. He landed some huge client that required constant attention, which meant even more travel, even longer hours, even less time at home. Most girlfriends would have been annoyed, but I was thrilled. More freedom, more time with Gordon, and Larry felt so guilty about neglecting me that the gifts and expensive dinners became even more frequent. I should have realized that Larry's absence might make him more observant when he actually was around, not less. I should have been more careful about covering my tracks, more cautious about the details that didn't quite add up. But I'd gotten comfortable, maybe even a little cocky about how well I was managing everything. The afternoon, everything fell apart, started like any other. I'd spent the weekend with Gordon at his place, telling Larry I was visiting my family out of state. We'd had an amazing time. Gordon had been particularly attentive, probably because I'd been picking up all our expenses, and he was feeling generous with his affection. I was in such a good mood when I got back to Larry's apartment that I wasn't paying attention to details like I should have been. I tried my key in the front door, but it wouldn't turn. At first, I thought something was wrong with the lock. Maybe the building maintenance had been doing work or something. But when I tried my key fob for the main entrance, that didn't work either. That's when the panic started setting in. Not guilt, I wasn't there yet. Just panic that something had gone wrong with my perfect setup. I tried calling Larry, but the calls went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but the messages showed as delivered but unread. I had to go to campus because I literally had nowhere else to go. I was sitting in the student union, trying to figure out what could have happened, when a courier approached me with an envelope. Official legal papers, demanding repayment of $37,000 for expenses Larry claimed to have covered on my behalf. $37,000. I stared at that number in disbelief. Had I really cost him that much? Even if I had, it wasn't like I'd forced him to spend that money. He'd offered, insisted even. He'd gotten satisfaction from helping me, from being my hero, And now he wanted to act like I'd somehow stolen from him? The papers detailed everything: rent payments, tuition, the phone, the laptop, groceries, utilities, even dinners and gifts. Like he'd been keeping a spreadsheet of every dollar he'd ever spent on me, waiting for the right moment to present me with a bill. I tried calling him from different phones, but he wasn't taking calls from unknown numbers. When I finally did get through, using Reagan's phone, he just said, "All communication goes through my lawyer now," and hung up on me. My mother got involved, of course. Avery was furious, not at me, but at Larry for what she called his vindictive overreaction. "He's trying to destroy your future over a relationship that didn't work out," she said. "This is emotional abuse." We went to Larry's lawyer together, hoping to negotiate something reasonable. I mean, $37,000? Even if I'd wanted to pay it back, where was I supposed to get that kind of money? I was a college student, working part-time. Larry knew that when he decided to spend all that money on me. The lawyer was completely unsympathetic. He had receipts for everything, bank statements, even recordings of me talking to my friends about how I was milking the tech guy for all he's worth. Hearing my own voice played back in that sterile office, laughing about Larry's generosity, was mortifying. Not because I felt guilty, but because I sounded so much more calculating than I'd thought I was. We managed to negotiate the amount down by returning the items I still had: the phone, the laptop, designer bags, and clothes. But, even after all that, there was still $18,000 in rent and tuition payments that couldn't be returned. Money that was just gone that I now owed to someone who'd apparently been documenting every dollar from the beginning. My mother arranged a payment plan, promising that I'd pay it back in installments, which meant I had to drop out of college and get a real job. Not some part-time cafe gig, but actual full-time work that would let me make serious payments toward a debt I never thought I'd have to repay. The sales job I ended up with was brutal. High pressure, commission-based, working with people who were just as calculating as I'd been, but in a completely different way. 60-hour weeks, constant rejection, the kind of stress that Larry had been dealing with for years. For the first time, I understood why he'd been so grateful for someone who seemed to understand his work life. But I was angry, not enlightened. Angry at Larry for being vindictive, instead of just accepting that relationships sometimes don't work out. Angry at the legal system for treating what I saw as normal relationship dynamics like some kind of fraud. Angry at everyone who acted like I'd committed some terrible crime instead of just being a girlfriend who'd accepted help from someone who could afford to give it. Gordon, predictably, disappeared as soon as the money dried up. Suddenly, he was too busy with work projects to hang out, too stressed about his own finances to be much support during my legal troubles. The man I'd thought I had a future with evaporated the moment I became a liability instead of an asset. 18 months later, I'm still making payments to Larry through his lawyer. Still working in sales, still living with my mother, still bitter about how everything went down. I see Larry occasionally around town. It's not that big a place, and he always looks like he's doing well. New clothes, new car, the kind of confidence that comes from having won a battle you didn't even know you were fighting. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's dating someone new. Some woman from his industry who apparently understands his work schedule and doesn't mind his travel. Good for them, I guess. They deserve each other. People act like Larry was some innocent victim in all of this, but that's not how I see it. He made choices too. He chose to spend that money, chose to offer help, chose to play the hero in what he thought was our relationship. The fact that he kept receipts for everything suggests he was never as generous as he pretended to be. Real generosity doesn't come with strings attached. Look, I'm not saying I handled everything perfectly. Maybe I should have been more upfront about Gordon, more honest about my financial situation, more clear about what I wanted from our relationship. But Larry wasn't exactly honest either. He let me think he was this successful guy who had money to burn, who enjoyed spoiling his girlfriend, who got satisfaction from taking care of someone. If that was all an act, then he's as much of a manipulator as I supposedly am. The truth is, we were both using each other. Larry got to feel important and needed, Got to have a beautiful girlfriend who made him look successful and desirable. I got financial stability and nice things, and the freedom to live the life I wanted. It was a transaction that worked for both of us until he decided to change the terms retroactively. I've learned my lesson, though. Next time, and there will be a next time, I'll be more careful about the paper trail, more strategic about managing expectations, more aware of the legal implications of accepting help from someone who might later decide that help came with conditions I never agreed to. Because at the end of the day, Larry didn't have to spend that money. Nobody forced him to pay my rent, or buy me expensive gifts, or cover my tuition. He made those choices because they served his needs at the time. The fact that he later regretted those choices doesn't make me a criminal. It just makes him someone who learned too late that generosity without boundaries is just another form of stupidity.